Hello, it's Steve Smith here, and since I've got the screencasting bug at the moment and in this period of confinement, there's plenty of time to do this sort of thing. I thought I'd give you a guided tour of Frenchteacher.net. So, very briefly, the background to this was when I was still teaching before 2012, I'd already started a free site where I was sharing worksheets mainly with other teachers around the world. When I took retirement from the classroom in 2012, I decided to keep it going because I enjoy writing resources. And at that point, I turned it into a low-cost subscriber site. And since then, I've been adding resources to it every year. There are something like 1,800 worksheets, presentations, and PowerPoints, etc., etc. So lots of different stuff. So this is going to be a little look round. So I'm in my own administrator mode, which means I can see all the pages that a non-subscriber wouldn't see. So let me just take you around the site a little bit. So from the home page there, we always get the latest updates. So whenever I added a new resource, then you see what's going on there. And then those updates are kept up to date, so you can see what's been added recently, so that the site is being regularly refreshed. Now, on the main menu page, this is the main resources page for subscribers, divided into beginners, that's primary, year 7 up to A-level, and then there's also a separate page for adult learners, because there are quite a few French tutors who use the site as well. Then there's a section with free stuff, so that's some PowerPoints. Sometimes these are ones that were given to me, some by my former colleague Cécile Geneviève at Ripon Grammar School. And then there's a samples page, so if we just have a quick look at the samples page, you can see then recently the home study packs I've added for different levels, and then samples from each of the pages from year 7 through to A level. So every now and again I put a tempter up there for people. Then on the free stuff page as well, because when I was teaching I used to do quite a few whiteboard notes that I could instantly display for students. I've left these on the site as a free resource. So there's nothing fancy about them. They're all in Word format and they're all editable, so you can take them, you can use them, you can turn them into PowerPoints if you like. So that's the whiteboard notes. Then if we go back to the free stuff, actually there are some Spanish resources on the site, and these were again from Cécile, who is now at Batley Grammar School in West Yorkshire in England, and she was the queen of the PowerPoint at Ripon Grammar School, and did some lovely, simple, very usable PowerPoints for French and Spanish. So she very kindly passed these on to me so that they could be shared freely. So that's the free stuff. Also, amongst all the free stuff here, there's what I've called the Teacher's Guide. I'm not going to go into that in detail, but you can see the different topics there that I've covered in the form of kind of short essays on various aspects of language teaching. And actually, some of that material found its way in a different form into the book I wrote with Gianfranco called The Language Teacher Toolkit, because originally I'd written a sort of a free handbook for languages departments, and that formed part of the sort of skeleton of the Language Teacher Toolkit. Then my links pages, which I try and keep up to date. I look back at those every 2 or 3 months and try and get rid of any dead sites and add any new ones when they come up. And I guess the ones that are most used are the first two. Let me just show you the interactive sites links. So they're divided into ones that are mainly to do with grammar. So these are French, although sometimes they involve other languages as well. So these are ones where students can interact with the page, manipulating the language. And then there's a whole section here for listening and reading. And they are less interactive, but some of them are. And they're ones that I've looked at myself, which I could recommend. So I only put stuff on there that I would actually recommend myself as being useful for teachers. But of course, that's a matter of taste, isn't it? So that's the interactive sites, and then we have a quick look at the other resources. So again, quite a lot of different stuff here. These are worksheet sites, for example, and you can see there's quite a long list of those, some of which you will know, like the very good Un Jour en Actu online magazine, which, as I'm speaking now, I believe all the material is free on there. Lesser known sites, perhaps like Les Débrouillards, an online magazine. And then, of course, we have, for example, the updated GCSE Bite Size site from the BBC. That's all been revamped in the last, I think, 3 or 4 months, and there's some really good stuff on there. This is one of my favourites, France Bienvenue, produced down in Marseille by a teacher and her students. And that's been going for a good few years and has great conversations with videos and so on. So that just gives you a broad idea of some of the links there. And you can see I've got links specifically for primary school teachers. And I've also got a list of recommended subscription sites and various ones that I can recommend there. Do Languages, particularly for A-level, French, German and Spanish. That's written by my friend Steve Glover. TeachVid, relatively new site from Martin Lapworth, fantastic for combining listening with reading and language manipulation. The recently revamped Language Gym from Gianfranco Conti and his team. Atonto has been around for a good few years. I was using that back in about 2009, 2010 by Esther Mercier. Very good for interactive whiteboard use with various languages. So quick look at those. And then moving on, I have a separate page for testimonials, which is kind of part of what you have to do to promote your site. And I've had masses of these from teachers all around the world, and people have sent me nice messages, and it's always nice to receive feedback from teachers. Now let's go back into the main resources site, because if you subscribe to the site, this is what you would see. So in the primary year 7 page, the section I've beefed up mainly in the last couple of years is this one with PowerPoints. And I think it was when I discovered the site pixabay.com with all its free-to-use images, including the fact that you can use them for commercial use, means that this freed me up to write PowerPoints, because otherwise you've got to be very careful, particularly if you're going to sell something here, as I am, about copyright issues. So lots of stuff, including quite recently my character Spotty, loosely based on Spot the dog. And all of these PowerPoints have a sort of built-in lesson sequence to go with them. So they can involve both teacher-led work and pair work and then other skills, as well as just listening and repeating. So PowerPoints, I've also in the last couple of years put some sentence builder frames, otherwise known as substitution tables, on various topics, because these are all the rage at the moment and are very, very good to use. I think particularly with younger learners, give you a lot of fairly quick success, and a lot of teachers report how the motivation of their classes has improved by using sentence builders. Then various worksheets, some of these go back some time, on familiar beginners topics. And a particular thing on this page is my parallel reading texts, because it's always a problem, isn't it, finding interesting material for beginners. So I came up with topics that I thought might be of interest to beginners and created parallel texts. These are a paragraph of text in French accompanied by its English version, and then some comprehension exercises based on them. I know teachers make good use of these, and you can even turn them into a booklet which could be given for extra work for beginners. Then some verbs and grammar work for those who like to do that sort of thing. And over on the right hand side here, let me just scroll back up. A few video listening tasks. It's always more difficult to find resources for beginners online because it's nearly always too difficult. But I've found some bits here where you can adapt the task to the text enough to make them usable. Here's something called guided translation. So this is where we're translating into English with the use of gaps to help, and the reverse. I may add to these in due course, and then other typical topics there. So that was just a quick look at the Year 7 page, which is one of the less populated ones on the site, I would say. Then into Year 8, so that's Year 8 in England and Wales, so that's the second year of learning. Not sure why this one's formatting differently at the moment, but again we've got PowerPoints, grammar, divided by category. Usually in the second year of learning, students are beginning to go beyond present tense in most course books. So we've got near future, plenty of work on the passé composé, some grammar notes that can be just dished out as print-offs, a little bit more video listening, because now that the students have got a bit more experience, then they can begin to decipher and make useful use of online videos. Petit Ours Brun is that cartoon character for very, very young children, and we're talking sort of 2- and 3-year-olds, but even those need to be used with care. Some more parallel texts and vocabulary material, including crosswords and dominoes, if you like to play domino games. Also a bunch of easy dialogues, which come together with exercises so that the dialogues can be read aloud and adapted, and more sentence builder frames, and then some random stuff at the bottom. So that was Year 8. Let's just have a quick look at Year 9. And on the left-hand column then, we've got more grammar, big focus on perfect tense and future tense. Also some stuff on the imperfect, because many students are beginning to work with the imperfect by their 3rd year of learning. And then mixing up the tenses. Various other grammar points with the odd PowerPoint mixed in there. And on the right-hand side, some more video listening material, parallel reading, and this is what I've been doing most recently, narrow reading. These are those exercises where you have, say, 4, 5 or 6 short paragraphs, where each paragraph recycles the same sort of chunks, so that students have their input flooded with high-frequency chunks, and then each of these sets of paragraphs comes with exercises which build in more recycling of the language. Then we begin to see something you'll see much more of in the other pages. That's texts with exercise. So the classic written text with a range of comprehension exercises, both for input and for manipulation of the language. Again, more vocabulary stuff here, crosswords, code breaker exercises, which are quite fun, and some bits and pieces there. So that was the Year 9 page, that's 3rd year. Now we get to the most populated pages on the site. So the Year 10, 11, so that's after, say, 4 or 5 years, and because many of the users of the site are working in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, there is some emphasis here on our GCSE examination. But teachers from around the world use the site. So I've got Australian teachers, Canadian teachers in the Middle East, international schools, New Zealand, lots of different places. So here we've got a more substantial area of grammar, including more difficult areas of grammar, what would normally be thought to be more difficult. For example, mixing up tenses, pluperfect tense, government of verbs, 2 verbs together. These are often a bit like the sort of audiolingual style drills where there's repetitive practice of the same sort of grammatical structure. Then we have more sentence builder frames, which can be used for revision in the run-up to exams. I would have thought very good for practicing for speaking tests, for example, and for writing compositions. And then grammar notes for handing out, translations into French, and still in the left-hand column here, parallel reading, It's always hard to decide what students will enjoy reading, so I try and find things that might reach a few students, might appeal to them. Then some texts with questions in English and jigsaw reading and gap fill. Where it says TM3, this is Martin Lapworth's Task Magic, where he has a facility for creating PDF worksheets based on texts, and he very kindly let me use that for some of the resources here. And then we've got texts based on various themes. Some of these go back a few years. Whenever I put a new resource on the site, I always indicate when it's fresh. So you'll see themes that crop up in the GCSE exam, including some literary texts, because that's part of the GCSE in England and Wales, including a book of 10 extracts. And then various miscellaneous topics there. And then if I just scroll back up and we'll look at the right-hand column. So what I call 30-minute listening tasks. These are instant low prep tasks for teachers where you simply read aloud a text or record it in advance. And then these are aimed at the higher tier of GCSE, so they're for more advanced learners, and then the foundation tier for the less brilliant classes, shall we say. And then we've got some audio listening. These are linked to that excellent website, Audiolingua. Let's go and check that out if you haven't seen it before. So these are short extracts, usually 2 to 3 minutes, sometimes less, with various exercises to go with them, again divided into higher and foundation. And then video listening. Now, because students are getting more competent, it gives you greater access to online material. So I have quite a range of stuff here based on video links, and for me, for copyright reasons, this is so convenient because I can just link out to something that is online and I don't have to embed it on my site. And again, quite a good bunch of crosswords. I know teachers enjoy using those. And then down here, these are resources here specifically related to the GCSE exam, although, you know, other people could use these as well. So these are, you know, very familiar to teachers in England and Wales and Northern Ireland. I do have quite a few teachers in Scotland and Ireland who use this material, because obviously there's a big crossover with the sort of syllabuses that are covered in those countries. And then some old material that was from the earlier version of the GCSE before 2018. A lot of these very usable though. So quite a bit on that page, and I'm lastly going to show you, well, not quite lastly actually, we'll look at the A-level page next. Now, when I first wrote the site, I think it got a reputation as being mainly for A-level because most of the material was aimed at that level, but in the last few years I've been building up the material for younger learners far more. So there's such a big page, this, I've actually got this designed so that you can just scroll quickly to specific parts of the page. So, you know, grammar exercises, lots of those. And lots to do with the subjunctive. Translations, both ways. Parallel gapped translations, if you want a variation on translation. And still on the left-hand side here, we're looking at lots of material specifically for the A-level exam, both the year 1 of the course. So these are students now who've done a minimum of 5 years of learning, usually. And then the more advanced material here, again, this is all specifically related to the various exam boards, AQA, Edexcel, Educas or WJEC in Wales. But one or two things specifically following the design of the Irish Leaving Certificate. And then Lots of written texts with exercises covering advanced level themes: family, internet, volunteering, heritage, music, cinema, and so on and so on. I usually indicate whether I think they're slightly easier, AS level, or slightly harder. But as you can see, masses of material there. And in fact, at some point I'm going to have to start weeding out some of this because the page is so big. And also some texts will become dated. 1, 2 maybe already. I need to just double check all of those. And so it goes on down the left-hand side then. So lots and lots of texts with exercises. And then if I just scroll back up to the right, instant listening tasks. Again, I always have in mind that teachers are under time pressure, so anything they can grab and use straight away I think is useful and can be a lifesaver, you know, for when the photocopier doesn't work, or for example, you know, when the technology lets you down and you just have your own voice to use. I mean, some of these resources can be just displayed, by the way, if you don't want to print off lots of stuff, particularly for the younger learners. That's something I used to do. I would display grammar drills on the board rather than have them printed off. Then audio listening, based again on Audiolingua, France Bienvenue, which I mentioned earlier, France Info, and other authentic recordings. So they're just audio. But then I've got a lot of video listening. One point I make here is that students aren't to log on to the site, and the logins, once you subscribe, are for teachers only, and they're not to be shared with students. So on the video listening, again, you'll see the same topics down here that we had for the reading texts. Lots and lots of lovely listening material, complete with exercises and in many cases answers. But when I first started writing the site, I didn't include answers. I always thought, well, the teachers will work out the answers anyway. And then in response to demand, I suppose it was about 6 years ago, 7 years maybe, I started to systematically add answers. So that would save teachers time. These video listings, by the way, can be done at home. So you can see the sorts of topics that are covered there, including some relatively sophisticated ones. I'm aware that I have a few users, I think, in the US who use the site when they're working with college students learning French, because this is pretty advanced stuff. Once you get to the second year of A-level in England, we're talking at least college level in the USA. And so on and so on. And a few nice little task-based discussions and board games that can be used for lots of chatting. And then some resources on film and literature, but I haven't specialized in this. These were really kind of legacy resources that I used to use and which I put up online, and some that were shared by my colleague Anne Swainston at Ripon Grammar School on Les Petits Enfants du Siècle. And then these also include certain links. The Germinal worksheets were by my former colleague Virginie Passera. And so on and so on. And also Paul Haywood sent me some nice material on Au revoir les enfants. And then lastly, as we come towards the end of this little guided tour, let me just show the adult students page. So some of these resources are duplicated from the other pages, but some are very specific and aimed at adult learners. So some of these very situational dialogues for, let's say, adults who are going to live in France or holiday in France, some are from the Year 8 page, some are original. And some of these are very specifically for adults to do with life in France and French-speaking countries. These down the left here are a selection from the A-level page that I thought would be of particular interest to adult learners. And on the right-hand side, again, a selection the video listening task that could be used, say, during evening classes or by students working from home. So I think that's probably pretty much what I'd want to tell you about there. So if we go back to the home page, and a reminder that the subscription is £30 a year. I know many teachers come back year on year, but you can join for 1 year and print off a load of stuff and then not come back again if you want to. And there are some teachers who do that, no doubt. And a reminder that nearly all the resources can be edited. So thank you very much. I hope you found that guided tour useful. And if there's any questions you've got, just leave them after the video. So do subscribe to my channel, have a look at all the CPD screencasts as well, and other material. Thanks very much for listening. Bye.